Hello and welcome to my video about prologues. Before we dive into it, I think the first important question that we must kind of figure out is what exactly is a prologue before we dive a little bit deeper. If you're kind of a young writer and you don't exactly know what a prologue is, or if you're an experienced writer, you're probably here because you have some kind of questions about prologues. So, what a prologue is it's normally a backstory that kind of sets the tone and pace for a story or a piece of prose, um, as you may want to fancily call it, a piece of prose. Now, in a lot of modern day writing, you don't really see prologues anymore. And some of that has to do with there's a lot more effective ways that people have kind of tested and tried and true to integrate the prologue into the bulk of their novel. um, there are some times, though, that we will still see prologues. I still see them too from time to time, but mainly when I see them, it's not in your realistic fiction or anything like that. It's in your science fiction, it's in your fantasy, it's not in your romance novels or anything like that. Um, because there are effective ways of addressing that backstory, which is what which is what prologue is. Um, and there's more effective ways of addressing that in your story. Now, like I said, sometimes we still see prologues. An example of where a prologue could be effective in a piece of prose would be like, taking fantasy, for example. Let's say before your main character of the story that you're telling, um, let's say there was a time frame before where there's like an evil sorcerer that has created this curse object, maybe a ring or something. And so that takes place. That's the backstory. That's 2,000 years ago before your main character is involved. It's not part of your main character's timeline. So it's kind of a little bit harder to work it in like a flashback or something. Um, so when you have an instance like that, why it's effective is because it's separate, it's part of the backstory. Whatever this curse object is, in this case, a ring, is eventually going to meet your main character. And what makes that backstory effective is because we're going to meet your main character. Your main character is going to kind of come across this cursed ring, and in the mind of a reader, the reader already knows the backstory of this ring. It's like, no, it's cursed. Don't touch that. But that's also could be the setup for what is going to happen with this curse item. How is it going to corrupt your main character? What kind of hero quest is your main character going to go on to because of this curse object? So it kind of gets the ball rolling. So there are still times where a prologue can be effective and useful, but most of the time in modern day telling of stories, there's a lot more effective ways of doing that. Now, like I said, if you're here, you may already have something written where you have a prologue, and there's a part of your writer gut that's going, I don't know if I should keep this prologue. My advice, my suggestion, listen to that. Listen to that gut of yours. Because if it's saying, hey, this ain't working, I don't know if I should keep this, there's probably a better way to do it. And you just have to kind of sometimes watch YouTube videos. I've done that. Or ask your writer friends, a writing group, and maybe somebody might jumble something loose. Um, but if something's telling you that maybe you should get rid of your prologue, you probably should. That's the sincerest advice that I can give you because I've done it with some of my own pieces. In any kind of editing process, like should I get rid of this? Should I not? If there's something saying should I get rid of this, there's something saying this could be better. And writers are competitive, and we always try our best to be like perfectionists and whatnot, and put our best work out there. So listen to that because it might be a little bit frustrating to get to that point where it's better, but it's worth it. So, like I said, so there's going to be three strategies that I share with you. Now, the first one is not really the world's greatest, in my opinion, and a lot of people kind of agree. I've seen a lot of people that also agree with it too. But it is a quick fix, and because maybe because you're gonna have a few drafts of whatever you're writing, so it could be a quick fix, just kind of jumble things loose. And so here's a prologue that I came up with. It's pretty simple. I'm not trying for anything spiffy or too spiffy. So, prologue. Joe walked home from school. As he strolled past his neighbor's house, their dog came rushing out of the garage. Joe smiled, happy to see the dog. The dog opened its mouth wide and bit Joe. Now, like I said, Joe's going to be our main character. This is a prologue that's, it might be taking place like 14 years earlier in the novel, but still um, a part of his story and kind of like his timeline. So there's other effective ways of doing of where we can tell this aspect of his past, and I'll get to that. But for starters, one of the ways to change a prologue to make it kind of a little bit more acceptable would be you get rid of that word prologue and you just do chapter 1. Remember, you are in charge of fictional time. Your chapter, you could have a chapter that's 14 years ahead of chapter 2. Chapter 1 could be 14 years before chapter 2, which is why um, having that something like this be a prologue is not very effective. Um, because because somebody who's well versed with reading and whatnot are going to be, it's like, why did they make this a prologue? We're telling the story of the main character. Why not just make it chapter 1? Now, that's a very quick and easy solution. Um, Now, if you are enjoying this video, please feel free to leave a like. It actually really helps this channel grow more than you can realize. But for the next um, little tip or ways to incorporate your prologue would be to do a flashback. So, in this case, Joe walks down the hallway of the rescue shelter. Most dogs are huddled in the corner of their cages, their dog souls unable to get excited to meet a human out of fear of getting let down. Joe saunters past the cage of a Labrador named Chuck. Chuck sprints at Joe's, stops in front of his cage door and barks madly. Joe glances at the scar on his arm from the neighbor's dog. He'll never understand why that dog bit him 10 years ago. The dog was always a happy tail wagging spirit, but that's why he's here. He wants to open his heart and trust dogs again. Now, here, this could be a chapter 1 too. You're right there. Joe's walking in. So Joe's walking into this rescue shelter. We're coming back to that backstory of his, but we're getting this tension of who Joe is. We're understanding who Joe is. We're understanding the trauma that Joe is going through, and we're just kind of really tightly building this character already. Now, I did say earlier that prologues are effective in things like fantasy. Now, flashbacks can also be used in fantasy. Anytime that you're dealing with magic, you could have a magic mirror that shows the past. So you could still even do that example of that evil sorcerer 2000 years ago. There could be some magic mirror or some magic, wishing well or water fountain or something. Um, and you just kind of bring that back into like a creative flashback. Um, I mean, flashbacks are a very popular way of kind of covering backstory, and you'll see it a lot. Um, but that is another strategy for making a more effective prologue. Now, personally, for me, I like to do when I have a prologue and I'm trying to reincorporate it, and I like to do what's known as what I like to call uh, character agency. I'm not really sure if there's a super technical name for it. I really haven't come across this. It's just something that I found to kind of just it makes sense um, because character agency is letting your characters drive the story forward, letting their past, their backstories, um, and especially a backstory, or or in this case, with a past trauma. Um, People by nature, we like to talk to each other and grow and share and relate, and that's how bonds and relationships are formed. So especially so when you have a story where maybe your main character is meeting other people, and you kind of get this shared kind of theme of maybe trauma or something, and it's special, it doesn't have to be trauma, it could be other things too. um, but but here is my example. um, all I got's left is a dog or a unicorn. The carnival game operator says, "What will it be?" Joe turns to Sally. "Which would you like?" "Unicorn," said Sally. Sally says without hesitation. The game operator grabs the unicorn from the top shelf prizes. He hands it to Sally. Joe and Sally leave the tossing game. "I feel like some cotton candy," Joe says. "How about you?" "I'm game. It's right over there." Sally points to the side that reads Clyde's Cotton Candy and starts to head over to the line in front of the stand. Joel strolls alongside her to the cotton candy. "I have to wonder, why did you pick the unicorn?" "I don't like dogs," Sally says. "My neighbors had a dog. It would run wild and dig up the yard. Nothing made it happier than to destroy my lilies. I'll never get a dog. Does that bother you?" "Nope," Joe chuckles. "I'll never get a dog too." "Why?" "My neighbor's dog wasn't the best either. When I was 7, I was walking home from school. Normally the dog was a loving spirit, but not that day. It charged at me, and" Joe pulls up his sleeve, showing the scar on his arm. "Bit me. 13 stitches in all. No dog for me." So this is so as I was stating earlier with the prologue, because it's a backstory of the main character, if you have kind of characters that you kind of want to bring together and you want them to have kind of a nice little bond, or sometimes you can go the opposite direction where maybe you got a different character that really loves dogs, and Joe's like, "No, I don't." That might change, that person might be less like, "Well, Joe's a great dude, but I really got to get him over his trauma about dogs." Um, and there's ways to play around with tension and so forth. But um, like I said, this is just another strategy. Now, there's more strategies out there for prologues, but I also didn't want to create a super long video because we all have only so much time and energy to put into things. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video. If you have enjoyed this video, if somehow this has kind of clicked in your brain or been useful and helpful to you, I will be putting up more and more tips as time goes on. And to get notifications of this, of when I put out new tips for writing, all you have to do is to hit the subscribe button below, and then as soon as the video goes up, you'll get a notification. Um, and that's all that. So until the next time, good luck with all your writing. It's it's writing is this weird self kind of happiness when like when you do it. So um, I know it can be tough because it's a very personal, very isolating task. So keep up the writing, keep on pursuing it, and hopefully everything will pay out for you. And that's what I hope for. So until next time, take care.